Hello there, and welcome to this episode of the My Poetry Readings podcast with me, your host, Declan Walsh. And in each episode, we revisit some of the poetry that may have been part of our lives, and perhaps even discover some new poems along the way. In this episode, we're going to take a look at Mirror in February by Thomas Kinsella. I'm recording this podcast in February 2021, while still in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. Spring, and the time for both reflection and rebirth, has finally arrived. And these are two very strong themes in this wonderful poem. Thomas Kinsella is an Irish poet and was born in Inchicore in Dublin in 1928. And he's often described as a poet whose sensitive lyrics deal with the primal aspects of the human experience, often in a specifically Irish context. In the years after Yeats, there was a general change in the direction of Anglo-Irish poetry. And in the 1950s, a new generation of Irish poets began to emerge. And Thomas Kinsella belongs to this generation of writers. His main concern as a poet was not to limit himself to Irish topics, but rather explore a wider range of ideas and themes also. So with Thomas Kinsella, we have one of the first poets to move into this different area of awareness and exploration. Thomas Kinsella was initially educated in the Irish language at the Model School in Inchicore in Dublin. His father and grandfather worked nearby in the famous Guinness Brewery at St. James's Gate. By means of a series of scholarships and grants, this allowed Thomas to attend University College Dublin, initially study in science, but switched to humanities and arts on a nighttime basis after taking a job with the Irish Civil Service at the Department of Finance. His early works, and his affinity to his native Dublin, dealt with more of an urban landscape, which was in contrast to some of the more rural landscapes and stories of his contemporaries, such as Patrick Kavanagh. During the early years, he became friends with Liam Miller, who was the founder of Dolman Press, who published several pieces of his works, including his first collection, The Starlight Eye, in 1952. And he also established an important friendship with the renowned Irish composer Sean O'Riordan. In 1965, Kinsella left the civil service to become writer-in-residence at Southern Illinois University, and in 1970 he became a professor of English at Temple University in Philadelphia. He was awarded the Guggenheim Fellowship for Creative Arts on two occasions, in 1968 and in 1971. And in the following year, in 1972, he started Pepper Canister Press, which allowed him to publish his own works. He received the Honorary Freedom of the City of Dublin in May 2007, and most recently, in December 2018, received an Honorary Doctorate of Letters from Trinity College in Dublin, having also taught the Irish Tradition Programme at the same university. Thomas Kinsella has the wonderful ability to deal with the most intimate personal poem, as well as vast sweeping stories. Surviving over the centuries in 3 versions of Irish manuscripts, Thomas Kinsella spent over 15 years translating the masterful Irish tale On Thorn into English, and together with some wonderful illustrations by Louis Le Brocq, is generally regarded as one of the most accurate and definitive translations of this very important piece of Irish literary folklore. Often regarded as the Irish Iliad, An Táin Bó Cúailnge is an epic 1st century tale of the battle between Queen Maeve of Connacht and Cuchulainn over the Brown Bull of Cooley. Of course, Queen Maeve's famous burial site is located on top of Knocknarea Mountain, overlooking Strand Hill here in Sligo. Though many of Kinsella's poems deal explicitly with members of his own family, he's essentially a poet of abstract ideas and concepts. This short poem, which was included for study on the former Leaving Certificate English syllabus, is familiar to generations of Irish schoolgoers. And it first appeared in 1963 in the collection Downstream, and is in many ways typical of Kinsella's poetry in general. The poem, set in February as the natural world begins to slowly wake and renew itself, presents the speaker as a humble and solitary figure, suddenly overwhelmed and reflecting on the significance of the passing of his own advancing years. The past year has, perhaps for some of us, left a lot of time for reflection of our own advancing years. But rather than focusing on the finality that this will ultimately bring and throwing in the towel, I've always liked the references placing the towel to one side, to newly pruned trees, a time of learning and growth, all of which are present at the start of spring. Near the end, Kinsella does ask and inquire a personal interpretation that, of course, I will always leave open to yourselves to make. Mirror in February by Thomas Kinsella. The day dawns with a scent of must and rain, of open soil, dark trees, dry bedroom air. Under the fading lamp, half-dressed, my brain, idling on some compulsive fantasy, I towel my shaven jaw and stop and stare, riveted by a dark, exhausted eye, a dry, downturning mouth. It seems again that it is time to learn in this untiring, crumbling place of growth to which, for the time being, I return. Now, plainly in the mirror of my soul, I read that I have looked my last on youth, and little more, for they are not made whole that reach the age of Christ. Below my window, the wakening trees, hacked clean for better bearing, stand defaced, suffering their brute necessities. And how should the flesh not quail that span for span is mutilated more? In slow distaste, I fold my towel with what grace I can, not young, and not renewable, but man. In previous episodes, we've been able to look at some musical interpretations of the actual poem, but while preparing for this podcast, I've been unable to find any musical interpretations of note. However, included in the show notes below is a link to a wonderful reading by Thomas Kinsella himself, recorded a few years ago at the Gay Theatre in Dublin at a celebration of his life's work. And also included is a link to another acceptance speech that he made at the On Post Book Awards in 2018, where Thomas Kinsella received a Lifetime Achievement Award. And if you do have time, it is well worth checking out. We're coming to the end of this episode of the My Poetry Readings podcast, and I really hope you enjoyed the reading and a little bit of background to Mirror in February. And if so, I would be delighted if you would subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts, or indeed to the YouTube channel. And if you think anybody else would like to join us on this journey, please share it with them also. You can follow the podcast on our Facebook page and YouTube channels at My Poetry Reading, and links to all the social media platforms are included below. And indeed, if you would like to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, that would be very much appreciated as well. I would love to hear any feedback and comments that you would have, or indeed any suggestions that you have for a future reading. Now, I'm off to sharpen the quill for the next episode. Thanks for listening. Till next time, slán go fóill.